Let's take a look at the 2017 AFC champion New England Patriots and look and see what did they do this offseason. Did they get better? Did they get worse? What did they do in free agency? What did they do in the draft? How is their team going to be different in 2018 than it was in 2017? Well, let's start by looking at their cap situation. At the beginning of free agency, or at the beginning of the off-season, really, they had $17 million in cap space. As of August of 2018, they had $12 million of cap space. So they still have a little bit of room in case maybe a player comes available that they think could make a big contribution to the team, and they still have a little bit of money that they can roll over into the future years if they don't want to spend it. So their cap situation, surprisingly, is not horrible. I say surprisingly because they have such a talented roster. But still, they have more money than a lot of different teams out there. So, they're not in a terrible situation with regards to the cap. I want to review some of the players that at the beginning of the preseason I thought might get cut. And let's see what happened to them, all right? First, Dwayne Allen. I thought Dwayne Allen was a guy that was almost definitely going to get cut. You can see that in 2016 with the Colts, he had 400 yards and 6 touchdowns. But with the Patriots last season, 10 catches for 86 yards, 1 touchdown. And the crazy thing is, he actually played in all 16 regular season games. So it's not that he was injured and missed a bunch of games and so his production dropped below 100 yards. No, he played in all the games. He just didn't catch many passes. He would save $5 million in space with no dead money if the Patriots released him. So, I'm almost a little surprised they haven't cut him yet, but, there's still time. They might be waiting to see, what he brings into the preseason. What kind of shape does he show up in? How does he perform in the preseason? But that's a guy who you still want to keep an eye on because, $5 million is not a small chunk of change. So we'll see what happens to Dwayne Allen. Alan Branch was another guy that I thought might get the axe, and in fact he did. You can see here that he had a big drop-off in numbers, going from 49 tackles in 2016, 8 tackles for a loss, and 1.5 sacks, to 12 tackles with 2 tackles for a loss. So, Alan Branch, 33 years old, started to see a huge drop-off in production last year, and the Patriots were able to save $3.5 million by letting him go. So, he was a great player for many years, but Alan Branch, won't be back in 2018. Mike Gillislee is another guy that I thought, was at a big risk for getting cut. The reason being, you can see how, his numbers dropped significantly in his first year with the Patriots. In 2016 with Buffalo, he had 577 yards rushing with 8 touchdowns. On really only about 100 carries. So he had 5.7 yards a carry. So he had 2 really decent seasons there in Buffalo, and then New England signed him to a deal, and he ends up with only 383 yards. Now, he did contribute 5 touchdowns, but you can see there his yards per carry dropped to 3.7. That's a big, the target is 4. If you can get above 4 yards a carry, that's what teams are looking for. 5.7 is great, but 3.7 is just simply not good enough. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, the 0.3 yards a carry, but football's a game of inches. So the fact that the Patriots could save $2.1 million by letting him go, he's not a receiving threat when he's in the game. And in fact, last year he was a healthy scratch for 5 games. It means he was healthy to play. They just didn't put him active for the games. So, Mike Gillislee is another guy the Patriots haven't cut yet, but they signed Jeremy Hill. We'll talk about that later. So here's a guy who, he is on the bubble. They also drafted a running back, so we'll see what happens to Gillislee. David Harris, a linebacker. You can see he played many, many years with the Jets, averaged over 100 tackles a year for, 7, 8 years or more, but his numbers last year with the Patriots dropped off significantly. And he had a different role. Obviously, with the Jets, he was a starter. With the Patriots, he was more of a backup. But nonetheless, to have 22 tackles all of a sudden with 1.5 sack, no tackles for loss, he's probably done. 34-year-old linebacker. So he actually announced his retirement, and the Patriots were able to save, more than $2.1 million in that last year of the deal. So David Harris won't be back with the Patriots in 2018. Kenny Britt is another name that I thought might not be around in 2018. So far, they have not cut him. The Patriots are really desperate at wide receiver. That's probably their weakest position on their roster, if you ask me. He's going to turn 30 next season. 30-year-old wide receiver. You can see there he had good numbers with the Rams for several years. 700 yards, 681 yards, 1,000 yards in 2016. That's a great season. Then, look at that. Cleveland signs him to a 4-year, $32 million deal with $17 million guaranteed, and they cut him before the end of the first year of the deal. Wow, you don't see that every day. That's what I'll say. You don't see that every day. So then the Patriots pick him up, but in 3 games only had 2 catches for 23 yards. So, the Patriots are desperate at wide receiver, but I don't know. We'll see if Kenny Britt will make it, because they can save $1.4 million by letting him go. And the question is, one, can they find somebody else that can produce the same or better? And then number 2 is, let's say that you can find a guy that can produce about the same, but you can sign him to a minimum deal, maybe $700,000-800,000. Of course, why wouldn't you? You save a little bit of cap space. So Kenny Britt hasn't been cut yet, but we'll see what he's still got left in the tank as he's going to be turning 30 this season. All right, let's look at the offensive unrestricted free agents. These are some of the guys that contributed to the Patriots last year, but who were able to sign with any team. Dion Lewis, that's probably the biggest name, one of the biggest names. 896 yards rushing last year, 5 yards per carry. He also had 200 yards receiving, 9 total touchdowns. That's a lot of production. Okay? He will turn 28 this season. He tore his ACL in 2015 and had some additional knee trouble in 2016 that caused him to miss the first half of the year. He was playing on a 2-year deal that averaged $1.3 million per season. That ended up proving to be a heck of a value for the Patriots. Last year, he was, making about $1.3 million, and he rushed for almost 900 yards, had 9 total touchdowns. That is a New England Patriot deal. That's the kind of deal that they sign. That's what makes them a great franchise. And Tennessee paid him, $20 million over 4 years. Now, not all of that money is guaranteed because he does have the injury history, but still, I don't blame the Patriots for not matching that kind of offer when they have a guy who really only had, he had a good yards per carry for most of his career. even before he was with New England, but he never produced the kind of year that he did last season. So to parlay one really great year into, a 4-year, $20 million deal, you can't blame the Patriots for letting him go when they had some cheaper options, and we'll talk about what those options were in just a minute. Rex Burkhead, that's another guy that was an unrestricted free agent, could have signed with any team. He had been playing on a 1-year, $3 million deal last season. You can see he had, much lower numbers than did Dion Lewis, but 4.1 yards a carry, not bad. 5 rushing touchdowns, not bad. He was pretty good in goal line situations. So, they got Rex Burkhead for cheaper. He'll also be 28 next season. Will he be able to handle a heavy workload? The good news for Patriots fans is he doesn't need to. They have James White. They have a guy that they drafted in the first round, Sony Michel. So, they don't need Rex Burkhead to carry the load. They signed him to a 3-year, $9.7 million deal. That's much cheaper than 4 years and $20 million. So, that's the Patriot way. Get guys that, produce, but produce at a affordable price. Danny Amendola, that's a big loss too. There's 3 big losses actually on the Patriots for the offense. One of them was Dion Lewis. Danny Amendola was the other. You can see here he had 4 seasons out of the last 6 where he had over 600 yards receiving. Those are solid wide receiver number 2, number 2 wide receiver numbers. Look at that. Last year, played on a 1-year deal worth a little over $1.7 million. 600 yards, was a killer in the playoffs, was making just a little over $1.7 million. And what Amendola had to ask himself this offseason was what was more important to him. Did he want more money? Did he want a bigger role? Or did he want to play for a championship caliber team? What did he choose to do? He chose to sign a 2-year deal with Miami for $12 million. So, I guess he chose bigger role and more money, because I don't think the Dolphins are going to be a championship caliber team. But it's hard to blame him, He wanted to play. And Edelman is coming back, and he wasn't going to be able to have the same role, likely, with the Patriots this season. And certainly he wasn't going to make, 2 years and $12 million, so he signed with the Dolphins. Can't blame him. This is the other huge loss for the Patriots. Nate Solder, starting left tackle, just finished up a 2-year deal worth $10 million. Okay, that averaged a little over $10 million. Okay, let's be clear about that. So he averaged a little over $10 million a year, but he was able to get a 4-year, $60 million deal from the Giants. It made him, maybe the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL. So the Patriots, they let him walk because, number one, they don't have a huge amount of cap space. They would have had to let someone else go in order to keep him. But, you got a guy that is solid in pass protection, really protected Tom Brady's blind side, but wasn't that great at run blocking. So was he worth 4 years and $60 million? The Patriots decided no, he wasn't. Let's keep looking. There was a couple of other tackles, offensive tackles that were free agents. Cameron Fleming and LaAdrian Waddle. Okay, these are 2 backup tackles they had. Cameron Fleming, they let him walk. He had just finished his rookie contract, was a 4th-round pick in 2014. He signed a 1-year deal in Dallas worth $2.5 million. So he'll be the number 3, maybe the swing tackle there, maybe the number 4 tackle there. And LaAdrian Waddle signed a 1-year deal worth $1.5 million. He had just finished a 2-year deal that had averaged $1.2 million. So, he'll be the number 3 or number 4 tackle again this year in New England. So they brought one of the guys back and let another guy go. Let Fleming go. Who are the defensive unrestricted free agents with New England? All right, who were the guys that they needed to re-sign or let go? Malcolm Butler, that's the biggest name, and it's a big one. You can see there, look at that, 60-plus tackles each of the last 3 seasons. Had 2 or 3, 4 interceptions, double-digit passes defended. He wasn't as good in 2017 as he was in 2016, but he's coming off a first-round tender. There are not many guys that get a first-round tender in the NFL. Very, very few. So the Patriots really did value him. The deal is with the first-round tender, when a guy is coming off his maybe 4th season after being undrafted, then he's eligible for a second-round tender, which means that if another team signs him, they have to give you a second-round pick, which is a pretty big deal. But you have to pay that guy at least like $2.7 million, $2.9 million, or a first-round tender where you have to pay them even more. But if another team signs them, they have to give you a first-round pick. Very, very few teams are willing to give up a first-round pick. So, New England was able to keep him around for another season. But Tennessee, the Titans, they gave him 5 years and $60 million. That is number 1 corner money. And the New England Patriots just really couldn't afford to give it. They already have Gilmore. They decided to let Malcolm Butler go. And, he was gone after they sat him and benched him in the Super Bowl. There was no way he was coming back to New England. It's a big loss. It's not a small loss. I do think that the Patriots have some guys that can, step in there and maybe fill that role, but it's not a small loss for the Patriots. Here's a couple of other guys that were free agents. Marquise Flowers is a backup linebacker. You can see there he signed a $1.75 million deal. He really was just a reserve player with the Bengals, didn't get much playing time at all, particularly on defense. New England brought him in and, he had 32 tackles, 3.5 sacks. That's not, anything to just, turn your nose at. 3.5 sacks. He generated some pressure, got some tackles. So New England, got him for a pretty good price at $1.75 million. So we'll see how Marquise Flowers does this season. Ricky Jean-Francois, a defensive tackle, had good numbers with Washington in 2016. Look at that. 16 games, 32 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss. But in 2017, he had originally signed with the Packers. They let him go early in the season. New England brought him over, and he did all right. He had 10 tackles in 6 games, 3.5 sacks, was able to generate some pressure there, but he ended up going to Detroit and signing with Detroit. So he'll be gone. He won't be back. Let's summarize all of the major changes in the Patriots roster from 2017. Number 1, Jimmy Garoppolo. He's out. He was traded at the trade deadline to San Francisco. Who's in? They got Brian Hoyer, who will be the backup, and Danny Etling, who they drafted in the 7th round. So, obviously that's a downgrade. Tom Brady, if he stays healthy, of course, you don't need anybody else. But if Tom Brady gets hurt, it's going to be a rough season for the Patriots because they just don't have, a Nick Foles, a guy. If last year, if Brady had been hurt, Jimmy G could have stepped in there, probably performed quite well, kept it going. Maybe he could have won a Super Bowl as a backup. But Brian Hoyer, no. If Tom Brady at 41 years old goes down, that's the end of your season. At running back, Dion Lewis, starting running back, he's gone. But Sony Michel, first-round pick. I don't know. It's hard to call it an upgrade, but he's younger, he's fresher. He was great with Georgia, and he split time with Chubb there. So he's got a lot of, energy or whatever you want. He hasn't had a lot of wear and tear on his body. So he is fresh and ready to go. Great pick by the New England Patriots. Jeremy Hill they brought in possibly to see if he can make the roster. Let's look at his numbers. Okay, first let's look. There's Dion Lewis's numbers. You can see he never had a single season with 300 yards rushing. He all of a sudden blew up in 2017 once he had the ability, because before they had LeGarrette Blount, and so Dion Lewis was always kind of the number 2 guy. But with LeGarrette Blount gone, he steps into the starting role and he tears it up, 5 yards a carry. And you can see he always had good yards per carry, but he had some injury problems. 2013, he fractured his fibula. In 2014, he didn't even play. He was cut. Those two, the ACL surgery that required actually 2 surgeries. So, here's a guy with some injury history who had one phenomenal season and then some okay years. Hard to blame the Patriots for not wanting to match 4 years and $20 million. So, probably a good move by the Pats. At wide receiver, Brandon Cooks, gone. That was your number 1 wide receiver last year. I mean, he was only there for 1 year. But still, that's a significant loss from last year. Danny Amendola, gone. 600 yards plus last year. That's a really huge loss. And who's going to come in and replace those guys? You got Eric Decker. I don't know. Cordarrelle Patterson. Julian Edelman will be back, coming from that ACL tear. Malcolm Mitchell will be back. He had a knee injury. They drafted Braxton Berrios in the 6th round. Look, this is where the Patriots have a big drop-off from last year, is at wide receiver. Let's look at Brandon Cook's numbers. 3 seasons in a row with 1,000+ yards. Averaging over 1,100 yards over the last 3 seasons, 2 with New Orleans, and then last year with New England. 65 catches, 7 touchdowns, averaged 8 touchdowns the last 3 years. That's a big loss for the Patriots. And then Danny Amendola. Now look, he's 32 years old. He's going to be turning 33 this year, so he's not getting younger. I can understand why the Patriots didn't want to pay him $6 million. But it's a big loss, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons with 600+ yards receiving. He's a solid wide receiver. Julian Edelman, he will be back, but he's 32 years old too, and coming off an ACL tear. So you can see there 1,000 yards receiving in 2013, nearly 1,000 yards receiving in 2014. Missed some games there in 2015. 1,100 yards in 2016. He is a great wide receiver, but how will he do at 32 years old coming off an ACL tear? We'll see. But he'll be back. Eric Decker, you can see his numbers. He's 31 years old. So he's not young. And look at the last 2 years. Okay, he averaged 1,000 yards receiving for 4 seasons in a row from 2012 to 2015. Big numbers, averaged 80 catches, averaged 10 touchdowns per season, and then had a torn rotator cuff in 2016, only played in 3 games. In 2017, he played in 16 games, but only had 563 yards receiving. Now, he had Marcus Mariota throwing to him. Was that maybe the reason his numbers dropped? I don't know. Mariota is not a terrible quarterback, but he's not the best either. So, we'll see. The Patriots just signed him in the last couple of days. He'll be helpful, but how helpful will he be at 31 years old? How much does he have left? Cordarrelle Patterson, not bad. 450 yards receiving in 2016, only 300 yards receiving last year. once again, here's a guy who's had 5 years in the league. How much does he have left? I mean, he's not quite 30 yet, but how much is he going to add into that locker room at receiver? I don't know. We'll see what the receivers can do in New England. New England's bringing in Troy Nicholas at tight end. He did almost nothing after being drafted in the second round by Arizona. At guard, they brought in Matt Tobin, a reserve player. They brought in Luke Belanco. These are backup guys, not going to make a huge difference. Hopefully. They're not going to start. Left tackle, this is what you need to be worried about if you're a Patriots fan, all right? Nate Solder is out. They traded with the 49ers to bring in Trenton Brown. So it will be interesting to see, who went. He's going to compete with Isaiah Wynn, maybe LaAdrian Waddle. Which one of those guys is going to win the starting left tackle position? It'll be an interesting battle. A lot of people think Isaiah Wynn is better suited to play guard. My guess is Trenton Brown is going to win that competition, but who knows? It could be Wynn. It even could be LaAdrian Waddle. They brought in Ulrich John as well. This is the thing you want to keep an eye on if you're a Patriots fan. This is a big change. At defensive end, Cassius Marsh, they let him go in the middle of the year last season. I don't know why they let him go. He had 19 tackles in 9 games and a sack, but they decided to move on, and he went over to the 49ers. But they brought in Adrian Claiborne. Not a bad pickup. He's getting older. He has been around the league for a while. I think he's over 30 now. But you can see here, 9.5 sacks last year with the Falcons. Now, I will tell you, I happen to know that maybe 5 of those sacks came in one game against the Cowboys to their backup left tackle. Their starting left tackle was injured that game. Their backup went in there, and Adrian Claiborne just tore him up. So it's a little misleading. It's more like he had maybe 5.5 sacks than 9.5. But he'll help. This is what the Patriots really struggled with last year, is generating pass rush. And, Adrian Claiborne will probably be able to help you with that. But he's also getting older, and so, we'll see how much he's able to contribute. Derek Rivers will come back, and, he was going to be a rookie last year, drafted in the 3rd round. He was expected to contribute to the pass rush as well. But then he tore his ACL, I think, in the preseason. So you'll have him back as well. The defensive line is definitely going to look better this year than it did last year, because in addition, Alan Branch will be gone. You can look at his numbers there. Huge drop-off in 2017. How do you replace him? Oh, you just bring in Danny Shelton from the Browns. Great move by the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots really make smart moves year after year. Here's a guy, he had 34 tackles last year, but that's after the Browns moved to a 4-3. The year before, when he was playing in a 3-4, he had 59 tackles, a former first-round pick. So, the Patriots will have a big opportunity to see what he's able to do. He fits the Patriots system much better. It's a big upgrade, in my opinion. I think Danny Shelton, from a 33-year-old Alan Branch, it's a great move. It's a great move by the Patriots. So their defensive line will be definitely improved. What about linebacker? David Harris, their backup, gone, retired. James Harrison, who they brought in at the very, very end of the year after he kind of forced the Steelers to cut him, he retired as well. Shea McClellan, a reserve linebacker, he's gone. In comes Juwan Bentley, who is a 5th-round pick, and Christian Sam, a 6th-round pick. But the bigger news is that Dante Hightower will be back after missing much of the end of last season with an injury. So, not any big change there at linebacker, but it'll be huge to have Dante Hightower back. At cornerback, we talked about Malcolm Butler. Starting cornerback there, 60 tackles, double-digit passes defended the last 3 seasons. Had to let him go. They had to let him walk. Signed a big deal with Tennessee. Johnson Badamosi, a backup corner, also will be gone. He signed a deal with another team. But they brought in Jason McCourty from the Browns. And, he's a solid player, solid corner. Not young, but a good addition, to that cornerback group. They also drafted Duke Dawson in the 2nd round. Probably not going to be able to immediately step in and be as good as, a Malcolm Butler. But that's a really good pick as well. Duke Dawson, they're expecting big things. He might compete for that slot corner position. And they also drafted Keon Crossan in the 7th round. Let's look at Jason McCourty's numbers. We don't have them here, but Jason McCourty did have similar levels of production to Malcolm Butler. Probably not as good, probably a slight downgrade, but they've also got some other guys on the roster that are going to compete for that job opposite Gilmore. Finally, the Patriots brought in Eddie Pleasant, who's a career backup safety. That helps provide some depth there at safety. Patriots looking good. But the big question mark is wide receiver. And it's interesting, I know that he's not a character fit, but it's interesting that they haven't thought about bringing in Dez Bryant. I know he's a cancer in the locker room, but the wide receiver core simply does not look good. And, I don't know what their plan is there. They got some cap space. They brought in Eric Decker in the last couple of days, but I don't know if that's going to get the job done either. But otherwise, the Patriots had a very, very good offseason. Signed some good guys in free agency, but, and really traded for some guys. Bring in the tackle, former right tackle with the 49ers. He'll compete for the left tackle spot. Brought in several good guys. They brought in Shelton at defensive tackle. So it'll be interesting. Patriots had a very good offseason. Definitely going to win their division. And they'll be competing against the Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars to see who can win that AFC. So that's the Patriots offseason. If you like this video, please click subscribe because we are going to have some amazing videos coming up. At the end of the preseason, we're going to break down the rosters of all 32 teams. And every week, we're going to preview the upcoming week's games. And then in the middle of the week, we're going to review the games from the previous week. So click that subscribe button because we are going to have the best coverage of the NFL on YouTube. Thanks so much.